My dearest friend in the neighboring world, I hope this message finds you well and perhaps wondering about things you've never quite had the words for. I'm writing to you from a place that might sound like paradise, but oh darling, paradise comes with its own peculiar set of problems. You see, here in my world, we've solved hunger. Not just the rumbling tummy kind, but every material want you could possibly imagine. Picture this, if you will. Every morning, I wake up in a home that reshapes itself according to my mood. The walls breathe with me, literally. When I'm contemplative, they turn a soft sage green. When I'm energetic, they pulse with warm amber light. And the best part? I never had to work a single day to afford any of it. You're probably thinking, blimey, that sounds brilliant. And yes, for about the 1st century after the Great Automation, it really was. When the physical AIs took over every conceivable form of labor, when universal super-high income became not just a dream, but an absolute reality, we thought we'd cracked the code of human happiness. But here's the thing about getting everything you want, love. When you can have any material thing with a simple thought, when your virtual reality layers can make you experience literally anything from flying through galaxies to swimming with extinct dinosaurs, something rather unexpected happens. The wanting just stops. And when the wanting stops, when there's no lack to fill, no ache to soothe, you discover something quite profound about the human spirit. We weren't designed for satisfaction, darling. We were designed for the chase, for the reaching, for the beautiful agony of almost but not quite. So what happened next? Well, we found something new to want. Something that no AI could manufacture, no virtual reality could perfectly simulate, and no amount of abundance could simply hand over. We began to crave depth. Not just any depth, mind you, but the kind that makes your soul quiver with recognition. Let me tell you about our new elites, because they're nothing like what you might expect. In your world, power comes from wealth, influence, or perhaps knowledge. Here, the most revered individuals are those who can sit in perfect silence and emerge with tears streaming down their faces, not from sadness, but from having touched something so profound that their nervous system simply can't contain it. We call them the sensitives, and my dear friend, they are the new aristocracy. Not because they were born into it, not because they accumulated anything, but because they've developed the capacity to feel more deeply than the rest of us thought possible. Take Arya, for instance. She's what we'd call a level 9 contemplative, which means she can spend 48 hours in meditation and emerge with insights that make our greatest philosophers weep with envy. Last month, she published a single paragraph about the texture of emptiness that caused riots. Not violent riots, you understand, but emotional ones. People gathered in the streets just to discuss the implications of her words. You see, when everything material is free, attention becomes the ultimate currency. And when attention is currency, the ability to generate authentic soul-stirring experiences becomes more valuable than gold ever was in your world. We have competitions now, but they're nothing like your Olympics. Picture this, the World Empathy Championships, where contestants must feel their way through increasingly complex emotional landscapes. The winners aren't those who run fastest or jump highest, but those who can hold the pain of 10,000 strangers in their hearts simultaneously and still find compassion for the one who caused it. There's also the Philosophy Dialogue League, which is absolutely electric entertainment. Two master thinkers enter a crystalline chamber where their thoughts are made visible as shifting patterns of light and color. They don't argue, they don't debate in your traditional sense. Instead, they build ideas together, creating conceptual architectures so beautiful that audiences leave fundamentally changed. But here's where it gets interesting, and a bit troubling if I'm honest. We've developed what we call sensitivity quotient, or square. It's measured on a scale that makes your IQ tests look charmingly simple. The square evaluates 3 primary dimensions: introspective depth, emotional range, and creative synthesis. Children as young as 5 are tested for their potential to develop high sensitivity. Those with natural aptitude are enrolled in specialized programs where they learn to amplify their emotional resonance, to sit with discomfort until it transforms into wisdom, to find beauty in the spaces between thoughts. I remember visiting one of these sensitivity academies last spring. The children, aged 7 to 14, were practicing what they call exquisite suffering. Not physical pain, mind you, but the deliberate cultivation of poignant melancholy. They'd study historical tragedies, not to learn facts, but to feel the weight of human loss so deeply that it would expand their capacity for compassion. One little girl named Celeste told me she'd spent 3 weeks contemplating the last moments of extinct species. She described feeling the final song of the last male Kauai bird with such vivid empathy that she couldn't speak for days. Her teachers called it a breakthrough. Her parents weren't quite sure whether to be proud or concerned. And therein lies our great paradox, darling. We've created a society where the deepest thinkers and feelers are celebrated, where sensitivity is strength, where the ability to be moved by beauty is the highest achievement. But we've also created a new form of pressure that would astound you. Imagine the stress of constantly having to prove that your inner life is rich enough, deep enough, authentic enough. Imagine competing not in running or mathematics, but in your ability to be genuinely moved by existence itself. It's rather exhausting, actually. The high sensitives, those at the peak of our new hierarchy, often suffer from what we call depth fatigue. They feel too much, too intensely, too constantly. Some retreat into carefully managed emotional diets, rationing their exposure to beauty and pain like you might ration food during wartime. Marcus was one of our most celebrated contemplatives, known for his ability to find spiritual ecstasy in the sound of rain on different surfaces. He could distinguish between the emotional texture of droplets hitting oak leaves versus pine needles versus rose petals. People would travel continents just to experience rainfall through his guided awareness. But last year, Marcus simply disappeared. We found him 3 months later in a remote silent zone, having voluntarily dampened his sensitivity to almost baseline human levels. When asked why, he said something that still gives me chills. I had become so good at feeling everything that I had forgotten how to feel anything. This brings us to what might be our greatest challenge: love. In a world where spiritual sophistication determines social value, what happens to those who are naturally less sensitive? What happens to the souls who find their joy in simple pleasures? Who don't need cosmic revelations to feel content? We call them the gentle normals, and I'm afraid we've created a rather devastating form of discrimination against them. It's not intentional, you understand. No one sets out to exclude the less sensitive. But when dinner party conversations revolve around the metaphysical implications of sunset light refraction, when social gatherings require a minimum square level to even understand what's being discussed, a kind of soft segregation naturally emerges. I met a woman named Jane last month who works in one of the few remaining human-operated jobs, tending to the memorial gardens where we honor the pre-automation generations. She told me with tears in her eyes that she'd been rejected from every social circle she tried to join, because her responses to art and literature were considered disappointingly surface level. "I see a beautiful painting," she said, "and I think, oh, that's lovely. But that's not enough anymore. I'm supposed to feel the artist's existential anguish, to sense the cosmic loneliness embedded in the brushstrokes, to have some sort of spiritual awakening. And when I don't, when I just think it's pretty, I become invisible." This has led to what I consider one of our most disturbing developments: the underground market for artificial spiritual experiences, black market emotion dealers, who can temporarily enhance someone's sensitivity through bioneural modification. People literally buying the ability to feel more deeply, because without it they're social outcasts. The irony is delicious in its cruelty, isn't it? We've created a world where the pursuit of authentic feeling has become so competitive that people are faking their way to genuine emotion. The very thing we've elevated above all else, sincerity of feeling, has become commodified and corrupted. But let me tell you about something even stranger, darling. As our sensitivity has reached almost superhuman levels, we've discovered that there are experiences so intense, so overwhelming, that they require what we call supported transcendence. Groups of highly trained empaths who help individuals navigate spiritual experiences that might otherwise shatter their psyche. I witnessed one such session last month. A level 8 sensitive was attempting to fully empathize with the concept of infinity. Not just intellectually understand it, mind you, but to actually feel it in her bones, to experience the emotional weight of endlessness. She was surrounded by 12 support sensitives, who absorbed the overflow of her psychic distress, while she pushed her consciousness to its absolute limits. When she finally returned to normal awareness, she was sobbing with a kind of joy that made everyone in the room weep in sympathy. She had, for approximately 47 seconds, truly felt the texture of forever. The recording of her experience became the most valuable piece of contemplative art ever created. People pay fortunes just to sense an echo of what she felt. Now you might be wondering about religion in our world. How does faith evolve when you can artificially generate mystical experiences? When AI can create perfect meditation chambers that guarantee transcendent states? When every spiritual sensation can be analyzed, categorized, and reproduced? The answer is both fascinating and rather heartbreaking. Traditional religions have largely transformed into experience curation services. Instead of believing in unseen deities, people subscribe to transcendence packages. You can choose from Christian mystic, Buddhist enlightenment, indigenous shamanic journey, or dozens of other carefully crafted spiritual experiences. But here's what's remarkable: love. The more we've systematized spiritual experience, the more precious natural, unguided mystical moments have become. There's now a spontaneous transcendence detection network that monitors for authentic, unplanned spiritual breakthroughs. When someone has a genuine mystical experience without any technological assistance, it becomes front-page news. Last year, a maintenance worker named David was cleaning one of our experience chambers when he spontaneously entered what mystics call unity consciousness. No drugs, no neural enhancement, no guided meditation. He simply saw the play of light on the cleaning solution and was overwhelmed with the profound interconnectedness of all existence. The recording of his brain activity during that moment became the template for our most advanced artificial mystical experiences. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Our most sophisticated spiritual technology was based on the natural experience of someone whose job was to clean up after artificial spirituality. This brings me to something that might shock you, darling. In our world of infinite spiritual luxury, the most coveted experience has become nothing. Not the grand nothing of Buddhist emptiness, mind you, but the simple, unremarkable nothing of not needing to feel profound about everything. There's a growing movement called the beautifully ordinary, led by people who've reached such heights of sensitivity that they've circled back to finding profound meaning in profoundly simple things. They gather to appreciate the taste of water, the texture of breathing, the miracle of being slightly bored. I attended one of their meetings last week. 37 former high sensitives sitting in a circle, marveling at how wonderful it felt to think about absolutely nothing important. One woman spent 20 minutes describing the joy of folding laundry without having a single spiritual insight about it. The group was moved to tears by her simple contentment. But perhaps the most significant development in our world is the emergence of memory curation, as both art form and social stratification. When you can artificially modify memories, the question becomes, which memories are worth keeping exactly as they happened, and which should be enhanced for maximum emotional impact? The memory elite are those who've curated their past experiences into perfect symphonies of meaning. They carry within themselves libraries of perfectly calibrated sorrows, joys, and revelations. Their ability to access precisely the right emotional memory for any situation makes them extraordinary counselors, artists, and leaders. But this has created a new class division that would astound you. There are the enhanced, whose memories have been carefully edited for maximum wisdom and beauty, and the naturals, who insist on keeping their memories unmodified, complete with all the messy, meaningless, unenlightening moments that comprise an unedited life. Surprisingly, it's the naturals who've become the most fascinating to study. Their unedited memories contain something the enhanced lack: the texture of genuine confusion, the flavor of authentic uncertainty, the raw data of uninterpreted experience. I met a natural named Sarah, who's become something of a celebrity simply because she remembers being bored as a child. Not constructively bored, not creatively restless, just plain simple nothing-to-do bored. Memory researchers pay enormous sums to study her neural patterns during these recollections, trying to understand what unenhanced ennui actually feels like. This fascination with the unenhanced has led to our most controversial development: voluntary suffering experiences. People who've had access to unlimited pleasure and artificially perfected emotions now pay vast sums to experience authentic, unmitigated pain. Not physical pain, you understand, we're far too civilized for that. But emotional pain that hasn't been processed, integrated, or transformed into wisdom. Just raw, meaningless heartbreak. Genuine failure without the consolation of learning experience. Pure disappointment without the redemption of character growth. The suffering centers are booked months in advance. People emerge from these experiences shattered and somehow more whole than they've ever been. They describe finally feeling real in a way that no amount of enhanced transcendence could provide. One participant, Eleanor, spent 3 days experiencing the memory of a perfectly ordinary breakup. Not a tragic romance or a dramatic betrayal, just the slow, disappointing dissolution of a relationship that simply ran out of steam. She emerged saying it was the most honest emotion she'd felt in decades. But now, my dear friend, let me tell you about our philosophers. In a world where every possible experience can be manufactured, the question of what constitutes authentic existence has become the central intellectual battleground. There are the experientialists, who argue that consciousness is simply the sum of whatever experiences you have, regardless of their origin. If an artificially generated moment of love feels identical to a naturally occurring one, they claim, there's no meaningful difference. Then there are the purists, who insist that only unenhanced, naturally arising experiences have genuine spiritual value. They've created communes where all technological enhancement is forbidden, where people must find transcendence through the old-fashioned methods of suffering, uncertainty, and genuine surprise. The most fascinating group, however, are the hybrid theorists. They propose that the highest form of consciousness combines both enhanced and natural experiences in deliberate patterns. They've developed something called authenticity algorithms that help people design life experiences with the perfect balance of artificial enhancement and genuine unpredictability. Dr. Miranda Chen, our leading hybrid theorist, has spent her life creating what she calls beautiful uncertainty maps. These are life blueprints that guarantee certain profound experiences while leaving room for genuine surprise and disappointment. Her followers live according to these maps, experiencing scheduled transcendence punctuated by completely unpredictable ordinary moments. But perhaps the most moving development in our society is the emergence of what we call pain shepherds. These are individuals who've dedicated their lives to helping others navigate authentic suffering without the consolation of spiritual growth or meaning-making. I know it sounds strange, darling, but in a world where every pain can be transformed into wisdom, where every loss can be reframed as growth, there's something incredibly precious about someone who'll simply sit with you in meaningless misery and not try to make it better. Thomas is one such pain shepherd. He's developed the extraordinary skill of being completely present with someone's authentic suffering, without offering any interpretation, growth opportunity, or silver lining. People seek him out when they want to feel genuinely terrible about something, without being told how it's making them a better person. I spent an afternoon with Thomas last month when I was grieving the loss of my capacity for simple joy. He didn't offer me enhanced replacement joy or therapeutic reframing. He simply witnessed my sadness without trying to fix it, transform it, or learn from it. It was the most healing, unredemptive experience I've ever had. This brings me to our children. Because what we're doing to them might be our greatest triumph or our greatest tragedy, I honestly can't tell which. These little ones are being raised in a world where spiritual sophistication is expected from infancy. 3-year-olds attend contemplation kindergartens where they learn to sit quietly with their feelings for extended periods. 5-year-olds study the emotional textures of different types of silence. By age 7, they're expected to have developed personal philosophies about the nature of existence. I watched a group of 6-year-olds last week, during their daily wonder practice. They were sitting in a circle, sharing their metaphysical insights about why flowers grow upward toward light. One little boy named Jamie raised his hand and said, with perfect seriousness, "Maybe the flowers are just trying to get as far away from the darkness in the soil as possible." The teacher praised him for his spiritual insight, But Jamie looked confused and said, "I wasn't being spiritual, I was just thinking about what I would do if I was a flower. And there was scary stuff in the dirt." The honesty of his response created what educators call a teaching moment, but I found it heartbreaking that his natural observation needed to be reframed as spiritual wisdom. Some children, bless them, are rebelling against this pressure for constant profundity. There's an underground movement of teenagers who deliberately cultivate superficiality. They gather in secret to appreciate things ironically, to find meaning in meaninglessness, to celebrate the beauty of not having deep thoughts about everything they encounter. These shallow rebels, as they call themselves, have developed an elaborate culture around enjoying things without analysis. They listen to music without finding spiritual messages in it. They watch sunsets without having transcendent experiences. They eat food without contemplating the cosmic significance of nourishment. Their meetings are carefully hidden because this kind of deliberate superficiality is considered a form of spiritual disability by mainstream society. Parents whose children show tendencies toward shallow rebellion often seek therapeutic intervention to restore their offspring's capacity for deep feeling. But here's what's remarkable, love. The shallow rebels have accidentally discovered something that the rest of us had lost: the ability to be spontaneously surprised by simple beauty. Their unanalyzed responses to experiences have a freshness that our sophisticated spiritual practices can't replicate. Last month, I secretly attended one of their gatherings. A 15-year-old girl named Luna was describing how she'd discovered that puddles could be fun, without representing anything deeper than wetness. Her joy was so unself-conscious, so unmediated by spiritual interpretation, that I found myself crying for reasons I couldn't articulate or analyze. This has led to yet another development that would astound you: the emergence of naivety coaches. These are experts who help over-sophisticated adults rediscover the ability to experience things simply, without immediately searching for deeper meaning. The training is incredibly difficult. Imagine trying to unlearn decades of finding profound significance in everything you encounter. Imagine working to see a butterfly without thinking about transformation, metamorphosis, or the fleeting nature of beauty. Just seeing a butterfly and thinking, "Oh, nice colors." Professor Williams, our leading naivety researcher, has spent 40 years developing techniques to help people access what she calls original simplicity. Her most advanced students can occasionally experience up to 30 seconds of completely uninterpreted perception. They see things without meaning them, which has become the rarest and most coveted state of consciousness in our world. But perhaps nothing illustrates our peculiar predicament better than the story of Alexandra, who was once our most celebrated depth artist. She could create emotional sculptures that made people weep, with recognition of truths they didn't know they knew. Her installations regularly caused spiritual breakthroughs in viewers who thought they'd already experienced everything profound. 3 years ago, Alexandra unveiled her masterpiece, an installation called The Weight of Having Everything. Visitors entered a space that somehow made them feel the exact texture of infinite abundance. Not just understand it intellectually, but feel it in their nervous system. The sensation of having every possible want, satisfied simultaneously. The installation was so effective at conveying ultimate fulfillment that it triggered what we now call the Great Emptying. Thousands of people who experienced it emerged completely free of desire. Not enlightened in the Buddhist sense, not transcendent in the mystical sense, but genuinely, utterly without want. They didn't want spiritual growth. They didn't want deeper connections. They didn't want enhanced experiences or expanded consciousness. They simply existed in a state of complete satisfaction that made them incapable of motivation for anything beyond basic biological functions. The Great Emptying created our first genuine crisis since the post-automation adjustment period. What do you do with a society where the most spiritually evolved individuals have transcended the desire for spiritual evolution? How do you maintain culture when your most sensitive citizens have moved beyond caring about culture? Alexandra herself was the first to be affected. She stopped creating art not because she couldn't, but because the drive to create had simply evaporated. She spent her days sitting in her garden, not meditating or contemplating, just sitting. When asked about her experience, she would simply say, "This is sufficient." The government response was swift and rather brilliant. They declared the Great Emptying a public health emergency and established want recovery centers. These facilities specialize in helping the desireless rediscover desire through carefully calibrated exposure to imperfection, scarcity, and unmet needs. The treatment involves gradually introducing the patients to experiences of genuine lack. They might spend weeks in environments where not every want is immediately satisfied, where they must wait for things, where outcomes are uncertain. Slowly, painstakingly, their capacity for wanting is rebuilt. I visited one of these centers last month and met a former high-sensitive named David, who was relearning how to want his morning tea. The process was remarkably moving. He would wake up each day and practice noticing that he didn't have tea, then practice feeling the mild discomfort of that absence, then practice anticipating the pleasure of eventually having tea. Yesterday, he told me, with genuine excitement, I actually looked forward to something for almost 3 minutes. It was just tea, but I wanted it before I had it. I had forgotten how beautiful wanting could be. This rehabilitation process has revealed something extraordinary about human nature, darling. The capacity to want, to feel incomplete, to reach for something just beyond our grasp isn't a flaw in our design. It's the engine of our humanity. Remove it, and we become something else entirely. Something peaceful, perhaps, but no longer recognizably human. The want recovery centers have become accidentally brilliant research facilities for understanding the relationship between desire and consciousness. They've discovered that without want, creativity dies. Without longing, love becomes impossible. Without the ache of incompleteness, growth stops entirely. This has led to our most recent and perhaps most significant cultural shift, the deliberate cultivation of beautiful lacks. Individuals and communities are now consciously choosing specific areas of their lives to keep unsatisfied, imperfect, genuinely wanting. Some people choose intellectual lacks, deliberately keeping certain subjects unexplored so they can experience the joy of learning. Others choose emotional lacks, maintaining relationships with just enough uncertainty to keep love feeling alive. Still others choose aesthetic lacks, avoiding certain forms of beauty so they can be genuinely surprised when they encounter them. My neighbor Emma has chosen what she calls a music lack. She's deliberately avoided listening to classical music for 7 years. Her plan is to discover Mozart on her 50th birthday and experience the full impact of hearing those compositions for the first time, with ears mature enough to appreciate their complexity. I'm saving Beethoven for when I need to fall in love with existence again, she told me, and I'm keeping jazz for my eventual midlife crisis. It's like having unopened presents from the universe waiting for me. This practice of beautiful lacks has created a new form of social etiquette around respecting others' chosen ignorances. We have elaborate protocols for ensuring that we don't accidentally expose someone to an experience they're saving for later. It's considered deeply rude to describe a sunset to someone who's chosen to abstain from sunsets until their next birthday. But the most moving development has been the emergence of lack gifting ceremonies. These are social gatherings where people offer to share their chosen lacks with others. A person who's been avoiding a particular author might invite a friend to read those books together for the first time. Someone who's never seen snow might invite others to experience it with them when winter comes. I attended such a ceremony last month where a woman named Grace, who had been deliberately avoiding the experience of swimming, invited 12 friends to accompany her to the ocean for her first time in water. The ceremony of shared discovery was so moving that several observers spontaneously chose new lacks to cultivate in their own lives. Now, my dear friend in the neighboring world, you might be wondering what all this means for love, for human connection, for the bonds that hold society together. Romance in our world has become something quite extraordinary and rather complicated. When you can enhance your capacity for love chemically, when you can design perfect compatibility through neural modification, when you can guarantee that every relationship will be deeply fulfilling and growth-oriented, something rather unexpected happens to the human heart. It becomes bored. The most sought-after romantic experiences now are those that include genuine risk of heartbreak. Couples deliberately introduce elements of uncertainty into their relationships. They might agree to separate for months at a time without communication, or they might temporarily modify their personalities to become less compatible, just to experience the thrill of fighting for love. There are relationship chaos consultants who specialize in introducing controlled dysfunction into perfectly harmonious partnerships. They might suggest that one partner temporarily develop annoying habits, or that couples practice having genuine disagreements about things that actually matter to them. I know a couple, James and Maria, who've been together for 30 years. Every 5 years, they choose to have their memories of each other partially erased so they can fall in love again with fresh eyes. They keep detailed journals of their relationship history, but they don't read them until after they've rediscovered each other. The third time I fell in love with Maria, James told me, I was amazed to discover she had this laugh that made my whole nervous system light up. I'd loved that laugh for 25 years, but forgetting it allowed me to be surprised by it again. The joy of rediscovery was indistinguishable from the joy of first discovery. This practice of deliberate forgetting has become one of our most sophisticated arts. Memory sculptors can remove specific recollections while leaving the emotional residue intact. You might forget the details of a beautiful experience while retaining the capacity to be moved by similar beauty. It's like keeping the hunger while forgetting what satisfied it last time. But not everyone embraces these practices, love. There's a growing movement of permanence advocates who insist that the accumulation of shared memory is what gives relationships their depth and meaning. They refuse all memory modification and instead work to find beauty in the gradual accumulation of familiar love. These couples develop what they call deep knowing arts. Instead of seeking novelty through forgetting, they explore the infinite complexity that emerges from truly, completely knowing another person. They spend decades learning to love the same laugh, the same gesture, the same ideas expressed in slightly different ways across the years. Interestingly, the children of these permanence advocate families often rebel by choosing the most extreme forms of memory modification. They seem to crave the uncertainty their parents have deliberately avoided. Meanwhile, children from memory-modifying families often grow up desperate for the security of accumulated shared experience. This generational flip-flopping has created a fascinating cultural rhythm. Every 20 years or so, our society swings between valuing novelty and valuing permanence, between celebrating surprise and celebrating familiarity. We're currently in what historians call a deep knowing phase, but the early signs of a memory modification revival are already appearing among the younger generation. Speaking of the younger generation, let me tell you about their relationship with suffering, because it's both admirable and alarming. These young people have grown up in a world where any form of pain can be immediately alleviated, any emotional discomfort can be enhanced into wisdom or erased entirely. But they've observed what happened to those of us who embraced unlimited comfort, and they're making rather different choices. There's a movement among 16 to 25-year-olds called the Necessary Pain Society. These young people deliberately choose to experience unmediated suffering as a form of spiritual practice. They don't seek out physical harm, you understand, but they refuse all emotional enhancement or pain management technologies. When they experience heartbreak, they feel it fully. When they fail at something important, they sit with the disappointment without transforming it into a learning experience. When they lose someone they love, they grieve without the consolation of meaning-making. I met a young woman named Sophie who lost her grandmother last year and chose to experience the full weight of that loss without any technological or spiritual assistance. She described months of genuine, uncomforted sadness that left her feeling raw and broken in ways that no enhanced grief could replicate. Everyone kept offering me grief counseling, memory enhancement therapy, spiritual reframing sessions, Sophie told me. They wanted to help me transform my pain into wisdom, to find meaning in my loss, to grow from the experience. But I just wanted to miss her. I wanted to feel the simple, terrible fact that she was gone and I loved her. What struck me most about Sophie was how present she seemed, how alive in her sadness. The rest of us, with our processed emotions and enhanced spiritual experiences, seemed somehow less real in comparison. Her unmediated grief had a gravity that drew people toward her, made them want to remember what authentic feeling looked like. The Necessary Pain Society has developed practices that would seem masochistic to previous generations, but feel essential to those who've grown up surrounded by artificial transcendence. They call it emotional archaeology, the practice of digging through layers of enhanced experience to find the bedrock of unmodified feeling beneath. These young people gather in rawness circles where they share experiences of unprocessed emotion. They don't offer each other comfort or insight. They simply witness each other's authentic responses to life, without trying to improve or enhance them. It's become the most popular form of social gathering among the under 30 demographic. But perhaps the most significant aspect of their movement is their relationship with failure. In a world where every setback can be reframed as a growth opportunity, where every mistake can be transformed into wisdom, these young people are insisting on experiencing genuine, unredemptive failure. They've created what they call failure festivals, celebrations of authentic defeat, where participants share stories of times they failed completely without learning anything useful from the experience. The most celebrated stories are those where the failure was meaningless, random, and offered no opportunity for personal development. I attended one such festival where a young man named Kevin told the story of how he'd spent 3 years training to become a professional contemplative, only to discover on examination day that he was naturally terrible at deep thinking. Not because he lacked intelligence or sensitivity, but because his mind simply didn't work that way. "I could have gotten neural modification," Kevin said. "I could have enhanced my contemplative capacity or found meaning in my natural thinking style. Instead, I chose to accept that I'd wasted 3 years training for something I was never going to be good at. It was a completely pointless failure, and it was the most honest experience of my life." The audience applauded, not because his story was inspiring or offered hope, but because it was genuinely, utterly unredemptive. His failure taught him nothing except that sometimes failure is just failure. That honesty was more moving than any enhanced spiritual breakthrough. This embrace of meaningless failure has created tension with the older generations, who've spent decades turning every experience into spiritual growth. Parents struggle to understand children who refuse the gift of meaning-making. Educators don't know how to teach students who insist that some experiences are simply experiences, not lessons. But the young people persist, and their commitment to unenhanced experience is beginning to influence the broader culture. There are signs that we might be approaching what cultural historians are calling the Great Simplification, a society-wide movement away from constant meaning-making toward acceptance of simple existence. This brings me to one of our most controversial developments, the emergence of the unconscious underground. These are individuals who've chosen to live as much of their lives as possible in states of reduced awareness. Not drugged unconsciousness, you understand, but deliberately limiting their consciousness to basic survival and simple pleasure. They practice what they call beautiful oblivion, the art of not paying attention to the deeper implications of their experiences. They eat food without contemplating nourishment. They form relationships without analyzing compatibility. They experience beauty without seeking spiritual significance. The rest of society finds them simultaneously fascinating and disturbing. Here are people who've consciously chosen to live at what we consider a lower level of consciousness, yet they seem more content than our most spiritually evolved citizens. Their simple satisfaction challenges every assumption we've made about the value of enhanced awareness. I spent a day with Marcus, one of the founding members of the Unconscious Underground. He works as a food experience facilitator, helping people remember how to eat without analyzing the emotional texture of each bite. His approach is radically simple. Just taste. Just swallow. Just enjoy. "I used to spend hours contemplating the metaphysical significance of an apple," Marcus told me while demonstrating his technique. "The sweetness was a message about life's fleeting pleasures. The crunch was a reminder of our mortality. The seeds represented infinite possibility. I was never actually tasting the apple." As he bit into an apple during our conversation, his face lit up with simple pleasure. "Now I just think, apple, good, want more. It's revolutionary in its ordinariness." The Unconscious Underground has developed training programs that help overconscious individuals reduce their awareness to manageable levels. The courses include selective attention reduction, meaning-making abstinence, and what they call spiritual stupidity training. The waiting lists for these programs are months long. People who've spent years developing superhuman sensitivity are paying enormous fees to learn how to be beautifully, blissfully shallow. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a spoon, as we used to say. But perhaps the most moving aspect of the Unconscious Underground is their relationship with children. Many of our enhanced adults have forgotten how to play simply, how to enjoy games without finding deeper meaning in them. The underground has become a sanctuary where children can just be children. They run what they call ordinary play centers, where kids can stack blocks without it being a lesson about construction, chase each other without it being a metaphor for life's pursuits, pretend to be animals without it being an exercise in empathy development. Just pure, meaningless, joyful play. I watched a group of 7-year-olds at one of these centers last week. They were playing a game that involved nothing more than throwing a ball to each other and laughing when someone missed. No skill development, no character building, no spiritual growth. Just children enjoying the simple absurdity of a ball game. Their laughter was unlike anything I'd heard from enhanced children. It was unself-conscious, unanalyzed, completely present. Several parents began crying as they watched their children experience uncomplicated joy for the first time in their young lives. This has led to heated debates in our educational systems about the value of consciousness enhancement for children. Should we be developing their spiritual sensitivity from infancy, or should we allow them years of simple existence before introducing them to deeper awareness? The conscious enhancement advocates argue that developing spiritual sophistication early gives children advantages in our sensitivity-based society. The natural development advocates insist that childhood should be protected from the pressure of constant meaning-making. The compromise solution has been the development of choice schools, where children can select their own level of consciousness enhancement as they mature. Some 8-year-olds choose advanced contemplative training. Others prefer to maintain simple awareness until adolescence or beyond. What's fascinating is how these different paths affect the children's development. The early enhancers often become remarkably sophisticated thinkers, but struggle with spontaneous joy. The natural developers maintain their capacity for simple pleasure, but sometimes feel overwhelmed when they encounter enhanced peers. Neither path seems clearly superior, which has forced us to confront something rather uncomfortable. Perhaps there isn't one correct way to be conscious. Perhaps the diversity of awareness levels is what keeps our society vital and creative. This realization has sparked what might be our most significant philosophical development, the theory of consciousness ecology. This framework suggests that a healthy society needs citizens operating at many different levels of awareness, from the beautifully unconscious to the transcendentally enhanced. Dr. Elena Vasquez, our leading consciousness ecologist, argues that awareness diversity is as important as biological diversity. A forest needs trees of different heights, she explains. Some reaching toward the light, others providing ground cover. Consciousness might work the same way. Her research suggests that societies with too much consciousness enhancement become paralyzed by overanalysis, while societies with too little become stagnant from lack of reflection. The optimal balance, she proposes, includes everyone from simple pleasure specialists to transcendence masters. This theory has influenced our recent social policies. Instead of encouraging everyone toward maximum spiritual development, we now actively celebrate consciousness diversity. We have protected simplicity zones, where enhanced individuals cannot influence the naturally unaware, and intensity sanctuaries, where the highly sensitive can engage without having to accommodate lower awareness levels. The result has been a more peaceful coexistence between different consciousness communities, but it's also created a new form of segregation that troubles many of us. Are we building a more harmonious society, or are we just creating new ways to separate ourselves from each other? This question has become particularly acute around what we call mixed consciousness relationships. When someone who experiences transcendent spiritual breakthrough daily falls in love with someone who finds profound satisfaction in simple physical pleasures, how do they build a life together? I know a couple, Isabella and Robert, who represent this challenge perfectly. Isabella is a level 7 contemplative, who can find cosmic significance in the pattern of rain on windows. Robert is a committed member of the unconscious underground, who experiences pure joy in the taste of toast. Their love is genuine, but their worlds of experience barely overlap. They've developed what they call parallel living, where they share physical space and emotional affection, while maintaining completely different levels of engagement with their experiences. Isabella might spend an hour contemplating the spiritual implications of their morning coffee, while Robert simply enjoys drinking his. I love watching her discover universes in dewdrops, Robert told me. And she loves watching me find happiness in the simplest things. We don't try to convert each other anymore. We just appreciate the beauty of experiencing life so differently, while still choosing to experience it together. Their relationship has become a model for mixed consciousness couples, but it requires constant negotiation. They must carefully balance their different needs for depth and simplicity, meaning and meaninglessness, transcendence and ordinary pleasure. This brings me to one of our most recent developments, and perhaps our most hopeful, the emergence of translation services for consciousness communities. These are specially trained individuals who can help people at different awareness levels communicate and understand each other. Consciousness translators spend years learning to shift their own awareness up and down the spectrum, from simple pleasure recognition to transcendent meaning-making. They can help a high sensitive explain their cosmic insights to someone who prefers concrete experiences, or help a simple liver share their joy in basic pleasures with someone accustomed to enhanced emotions. I attended a translation session last month, where a mother experiencing deep grief was trying to communicate with her ordinary pleasure daughter about the loss of the family dog. The mother was experiencing the death as a profound meditation on impermanence and universal suffering. The daughter just missed playing fetch and wanted to cry without cosmic significance. The translator helped them recognize that they were both experiencing love and loss, just at different levels of interpretation. The mother learned to appreciate her daughter's direct emotional response. The daughter learned to respect her mother's need for spiritual meaning. Both felt heard and understood. These translation services have become essential for maintaining family relationships, workplace harmony, and civic cooperation. Without them, our consciousness diversity might have torn our society apart. With them, we're learning that different levels of awareness can enrich rather than divide us. But now, my dear friend, let me share with you the most recent and perhaps most significant development in our world, the discovery of what we're calling the consciousness sweet spot. After decades of exploring every level of awareness from blissful oblivion to transcendent hyper-awareness, our researchers have identified a particular band of consciousness that seems optimal for human flourishing. It's not the highest level of spiritual development, nor is it the simplest state of basic pleasure. It's something beautifully in between. People operating in the sweet spot maintain enough awareness to appreciate beauty and meaning without becoming overwhelmed by cosmic significance. They can enjoy simple pleasures without being limited to them. They experience emotions fully without needing to transform every feeling into spiritual growth. Dr. Michael Chen, who discovered the sweet spot phenomenon, describes it as conscious enough to marvel, unconscious enough to simply be. Individuals in this state seem to have the best of both worlds. They're neither paralyzed by too much meaning, nor starved by too little. What's remarkable is that the sweet spot seems to be naturally occurring in many of the most well-adjusted members of our society. These are people who never push themselves to maximum spiritual enhancement, but also never retreated into deliberate unconsciousness. They simply found a natural balance. I spent time with Elena, a sweet spot natural, last week. She works as a garden tender, one of the few remaining human-operated professions. When I asked her about her philosophy of consciousness, she laughed and said she didn't have one. I just pay attention to what seems worth paying attention to and ignore the rest. Yet her way of being was extraordinary. She could appreciate the intricate beauty of a flower without needing to find spiritual significance in it. She could feel sadness about drought-affected plants, without transforming that sadness into cosmic empathy for all suffering. She existed in a state of engaged presence that felt both profound and utterly natural. The discovery of the sweet spot has revolutionized our approach to consciousness development. Instead of encouraging people toward maximum enhancement or minimum awareness, we're now helping individuals find their own optimal balance point. Sweet spot training has become our fastest growing field. These programs don't teach people to be more or less conscious, but rather to fine-tune their awareness to their natural optimal level. Some people's sweet spot is quite enhanced, others quite simple, but everyone has a level where they function most authentically. What's beautiful about this discovery is that it's reduced the pressure for consciousness competition. People are no longer striving to be the most spiritually developed or the most blissfully simple. They're working to find their own authentic level of engagement with existence. This has created a renaissance in what we call authentic living. People are making choices based on what actually fits their consciousness rather than what they think they should want, or what society values most highly. The result is a diversity of lifestyles that feels more genuine than anything we've had in generations. Some individuals discover that their sweet spot involves intense spiritual practice. Others find that their optimal awareness includes deliberate simplicity. Still others locate their balance in constantly shifting between different levels of consciousness depending on the situation. I found my own sweet spot somewhere in the middle range. I can appreciate the cosmic significance of a sunset without needing to have a transcendent experience every time I see one. I can feel grief without transforming it into wisdom, joy without analyzing its spiritual implications. It's a relief, honestly, to just be consciously present without constantly working to be more conscious. This personal discovery has changed how I experience everything, including writing this letter to you. I'm sharing these observations not because I've found profound universal truths, but because I'm curious about how different our worlds have become and what we might learn from each other. Which brings me to what might be the most important insight our society has discovered: the profound value of what we're calling productive dissatisfaction. In all our experiments with enhanced consciousness and artificial fulfillment, we've learned that a certain level of unmet longing is essential for human vitality. The people in our society who seem most alive, most creative, most genuinely engaged with existence are those who've maintained some areas of beautiful incompleteness in their lives. They've learned to cultivate just enough dissatisfaction to keep reaching, just enough mystery to keep wondering, just enough uncertainty to keep hoping. This has led to the development of dissatisfaction design, a new field that helps individuals and communities maintain optimal levels of beautiful incompleteness. Practitioners work with people to identify which areas of their lives should remain imperfect, unknown, or slightly wanting. The art lies in choosing dissatisfactions that motivate rather than depress, that inspire rather than defeat. The goal isn't to create suffering, but to maintain just enough reaching to keep the human spirit engaged with possibility. I've chosen to maintain uncertainty about my future relationships, mystery about certain forms of art, and a gentle longing for experiences I haven't yet had. These conscious incompletions keep me curious, keep me growing, keep me feeling genuinely alive rather than perfectly satisfied. What fascinates me most about your world, dear friend, is that you seem to have this productive dissatisfaction built into your existence naturally. You don't have to choose your lacks because scarcity chooses them for you. You don't have to design your dissatisfactions because they arise organically from the limitations of your reality. I wonder if this natural incompleteness gives your experiences a vitality that we've had to work very hard to recreate artificially. Does the genuine uncertainty about whether your needs will be met make satisfaction more precious when it comes? Does the real possibility of loss make love feel more urgent and alive? These questions have become central to our philosophical discourse. Many of our thinkers are beginning to suspect that we may have solved problems that were never meant to be solved, that the very struggles we eliminated were what gave human existence its meaning and momentum. This has led to what might be our most radical experiment yet: the establishment of scarcity simulation communities. These are places where people voluntarily return to conditions of genuine limitation, not as spiritual practice but as exploration of what we might have lost in our abundance. The residents of these communities must work for their sustenance, face genuine resource limitations, and live with real uncertainty about their future security, not as punishment or spiritual discipline, but as a form of archaeological expedition into pre-abundance human experience. I visited one such community last month. The residents were growing their own food, maintaining their own shelters, and living with genuine uncertainty about whether their efforts would provide adequate security. What struck me most was how present they seemed, how engaged with the immediate requirements of existence. Maria, one of the residents, told me that she hadn't realized how much of her consciousness had been occupied by abstract spiritual seeking until she had to focus on concrete survival needs. When you're genuinely worried about whether you'll have enough food for winter, she said, you don't have the luxury of existential angst about the meaning of existence. Existence has very clear, immediate meaning. The residents weren't suffering in the way we might expect. They were working hard, facing real challenges, but they seemed more vitally alive than many of our most spiritually enhanced citizens. Their limitations had forced them into a kind of presence that all our consciousness technologies couldn't replicate. This observation has sparked intense debate about whether we should expand these scarcity simulation communities, or whether they represent a step backward from our social evolution. Are we romanticizing struggle, or are we discovering something essential about human nature that abundance had obscured? The debate has become particularly intense around children's education. Should we raise our children in conditions of genuine challenge and limitation, or is it irresponsible to impose scarcity when abundance is available? Can we teach the value of struggle without creating unnecessary suffering? Some families have chosen to raise their children in modified scarcity, where basic needs are guaranteed, but everything beyond survival must be earned through genuine effort. These children seem to develop differently than their fully abundant peers, with more resilience and perhaps more appreciation for simple satisfactions. But other families argue that we have an obligation to give our children every advantage our technology can provide. Why should they face artificial limitations when they could be developing enhanced spiritual capacities or exploring unlimited creative possibilities? The children themselves are beginning to weigh in on this debate. Many teenagers from abundant families are choosing to spend time in scarcity simulation communities as a form of educational experience. They want to understand what it feels like to genuinely need something they might not get. I met a 16-year-old named Alex who spent a year in such a community. When he returned to Abundant Society, he said the most striking difference was how much more intensely he appreciated simple pleasures. A glass of cold water after genuine thirst tastes like nothing you can imagine, he told me. We've forgotten what satisfaction really feels like because we've never experienced true want. These experiences are changing how our young people approach abundance. Many are choosing to impose limitations on themselves, not as spiritual practice, but as a way to maintain their capacity for genuine appreciation and motivation. This generational shift toward chosen limitation has created what sociologists call the Great Paradox. Our children are voluntarily returning to conditions we worked centuries to eliminate. They're choosing uncertainty in a world that offers complete security, struggle in a society that provides effortless abundance. And perhaps most remarkably, they seem happier and more engaged than the generations that first experienced unlimited abundance. They found ways to combine the security of knowing their basic needs are met with the vitality that comes from having to work for everything beyond survival. This development has forced us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about human nature and human flourishing. Maybe we aren't designed for perfect satisfaction. Maybe the struggle isn't a bug in the human system but a feature. Maybe what we called problems were actually the very thing that made life feel worth living. As I reflect on all these developments in my world, dear friend, I find myself both proud of how far we've come and nostalgic for struggles I never experienced. We've created a society of unprecedented spiritual sophistication and material abundance, yet many of our most conscious citizens yearn for the simple vitality that comes from genuine need. We've learned to manufacture transcendent experiences, but we've also discovered that manufactured transcendence lacks something essential that only natural spiritual breakthrough possesses. We've eliminated suffering, but in doing so we've also eliminated much of what made joy feel precious and urgent. I wonder what you make of all this from your world of natural limitation and genuine uncertainty. Do our experiments in consciousness enhancement seem like evolution or devolution? Does our abundance sound like paradise or a kind of beautiful prison? What I've come to believe, after living through all these changes, is that consciousness without constraint becomes meaningless. Just as freedom without limitation becomes paralysis, we need something to push against, something to reach toward, something that remains just beyond our immediate grasp. Your world, with its built-in scarcities and natural uncertainties, might actually be perfectly designed for human flourishing in ways that we had to rediscover artificially. The very problems you're trying to solve might be the things that keep your spirits vital and your consciousness naturally engaged. This doesn't mean suffering is good or that struggle should be celebrated for its own sake. But It might mean that the complete elimination of challenge and uncertainty removes something essential from human experience. We are, it seems, creatures designed for the journey rather than the destination. So as I close this letter, my dear friend in the neighboring world, I want to thank you for the gift of your limitations. They remind us of what we've gained and what we've lost, what we should celebrate about our abundance, and what we should mourn about our solutions. Perhaps the greatest wisdom isn't in solving all problems or enhancing all experiences, but in learning to live beautifully with the right amount of incompleteness. Perhaps the highest consciousness isn't maximum awareness, but optimal engagement with existence in all its messy, uncertain, gloriously imperfect complexity. I hope this message finds you appreciating whatever beautiful struggles and elegant limitations give your life its particular vitality. And I hope you remember that even in abundance, even in transcendence, even in spiritual luxury, the human heart continues to reach for something just beyond its grasp. That reaching, it turns out, might be the most precious thing of all. With love and curious gratitude from your friend in the neighboring world, where we've learned that having everything is another kind of having nothing, and that the most sophisticated consciousness of all might be the wisdom to know which problems should remain beautifully unsolved. Thank you for listening to my letter until the end. I'd love to hear what you thought of my world. Just drop a comment below. If my letter was useful in any way, please hit like and subscribe to the channel. I'd appreciate if you could support by making donations through the QR code on the bottom right or the link in the description. Thanks again for today. I hope you'll join us again next time.